This is the new 2026 Hyundai Ioniq 9, and it's a big deal. A fully electric SUV that combines three-row seating with relatively affordable pricing. Now, that may not seem like a big deal, but it is. Until now, basically no other EV has combined those things. So today I'm going to review this, the new Ioniq 9, and show you all of its quirks and features. I've been using DeleteMe for years now, and I'm still just as grateful for it today as I was the day I signed up. They've been a great supporter of my channel and my privacy. The first time I saw my personal info online, my name, old phone number, addresses, even family details, it was on dozens of sites. As someone who's pretty visible online, I've had to deal with weird stuff, random emails, odd messages, people digging too deeply. That's why I take privacy seriously, and why DeleteMe is a core part of how I protect myself and my family. DeleteMe is a subscription service that removes your personal information from hundreds of data broker sites. You give them your info once and they go to work, sending personalized reports every few months to show exactly what they've removed. They keep monitoring so it doesn't come right back. Take control of your data and keep your private life private by signing up for DeleteMe now with a special discount for our listeners. Today, get 20% off your DeleteMe plan when you go to joindeleteme.com/demuro and use promo code DEMURO at checkout. The only way to get 20% off is to go to joindeleteme.com/demuro and enter code DEMURO at checkout. Support this car pod and your privacy. That's joindeleteme.com/demuro, code DEMURO. All right, time for the quirks and features of the Ioniq 9, the three-row electric SUV. Now, if you haven't really been following along in this market, you'll probably be wondering what makes this so special. Why is that interesting? And it's just because, like I said, there haven't been that many fully electric three-row SUVs. Most electric SUVs are smaller, two-row, like the Tesla Model Y or the Ford Mustang Mach-E or the Kia EV6. Now, the ones that have three-row have tended to be more expensive, like the Rivian R1S and the Tesla Model X. They exist, but they exist in a different price point. Now, this is more affordable than those, sort of more in line with a traditional, typical three-row family SUV. And its only real competition right now is the Kia EV9, which comes from Hyundai's sister brand, Kia. In fact, the Ioniq 9 and the EV9, they share mechanicals. They share a platform, battery technology, all that stuff. They're pretty similar, but while the EV9 is sort of a more quirky, kind of unusual design, this is intended to have a bit more of a luxury tilt compared to its Kia sibling. Now, I've already done a video with the Ioniq 9 right when it was first revealed, but that was with a pre-production model. It wasn't fully ready. I couldn't show you everything, and I couldn't drive it. So today, I'm going to do a full review, starting with the quirks and features, and starting specifically with the key, which I love. It is this, which is a Hyundai logo. It looks like an egg, but if you look closely, the Hyundai H is sort of in the negative space between the buttons, lock, unlock, all that stuff. And it is a really cool and clever key design that modern, newer Hyundai models have, and I absolutely love that they did that. Now, the Hyundai logo key isn't the only unusual Hyundai logo in the Ioniq 9. Another one is back here. The rear Hyundai logo is mounted sort of within the tailgate glass. It doesn't have like a raised emblem like in so many cars. It's just stuck in the glass. Definitely interesting and quirky. But the quirkiest quirk back here is undoubtedly the rear lighting situation in this car, which is completely made up of little boxes that go the entire way around the rear end, as you can see. Now, with the taillights on, well, there's a lot of little rear boxes lit up. When you turn on the turn signals, you get even more little boxes. Now they're flashing orange. Put on the brake lights and again more boxes. You can see on the top, the third brake light illuminates over the entire top and basically makes like a giant dome of little boxes in the back of this car. The whole thing is rather unusual. And the reverse lights are at the bottom, integrated into the bumper, again in little tiny squares, just like all the other lights in back. It is a very distinctive rear end design for this vehicle with its rather odd light boxes all around the rear end. And it's the same situation in front. Probably the most distinctive lighting element up front is the running light, which is a series of little light boxes running the entire front end of the vehicle from left to right, the whole front end all the way across, which is definitely unusual. Now you put on the turn signal and you can see little light boxes light up on either side, above and below the running light going across the entire car, which again is kind of unusual. And then the headlights, which are down below in this area, they are also made up of a series of little light boxes, and then you have even more light boxes next to them. And well, there's just a lot of different little light squares on the outside of this car. This has been a theme that Hyundai has used, a design element in its Ioniq models. We first saw it with the Ioniq 5, which also had little squares basically everywhere, and they're carrying it into this car too. It certainly separates them from other vehicles that don't have a lot of little squares all throughout the exterior and interior, which I'll show you in a second. But before we get in there, I should point out that the light squares are not the only unusual design element for this vehicle. There are a couple others. One obvious one, you look at it from the side, you can see there are little eyebrows over the wheels. This painted area over the wheel tire, it looks kind of like an eyebrow. It's set off from the wheel arch, which is black, kind of normal, but then there's this red body color piece. Really does look like eyebrows, and it certainly is kind of strange. But more unusual than that is definitely the overall profile of this vehicle. The Ioniq 9 doesn't have your typical SUV shape. It's sort of teardrop shaped, which is odd to see in a larger three-row SUV, unlike the Model Y or the Mach-E, where it's pretty common. Here, it's a little bit more unusual. This sort of windswept look brought to a vehicle this size. It definitely has a stranger profile, almost sort of minivan or station wagon-esque, although this is definitely a crossover in terms of sizing, dimensions, and driving position. Still, it has a distinctive shape, and it is absolutely not just another boring, generic SUV on the road. You will notice this. It certainly looks different from other vehicles. But anyway, next time to climb inside the Ioniq 9. When you unlock the doors, the door handles pop out, which is a nice, luxurious touch. You pull on them, you open the door, you get inside, and you see the luxuriousness continues in here. It's actually surprisingly nice in this cabin. This is an upscale, well-designed, high-end interior, not really what you'd associate necessarily with Hyundai, but it certainly does have the luxury tilt compared to its platform sister, the Kia EV9, like I mentioned before. This is a nice, high-quality, luxurious place to spend time. And yet, in spite of that, it's relatively affordable. Now, I say relatively because the Ioniq 9 starts around $58,000, which is still pretty expensive, but as far as three-row SUVs go, that's kind of the territory where they're in. It's a little pricier than stuff like the Hyundai Palisade or Kia Telluride, but it's not crazy off-the-charts expensive, particularly when you compare it to other three-row electric SUVs like I mentioned before. The Rivian R1S starts at almost $80,000 compared to $58,000 for this. The new Volvo EX90, also a three-row electric SUV, that starts at over $81,000. Most of its competition is vastly more expensive, and so this is relatively affordable. Now, this particular model, I should point out, has a sticker price of around $72,000 equipped this way. But beyond that stuff, let's move on to all of the interesting quirks, starting with the very unusual gear selector, which pops out from the steering column. It's this large thing, looks like almost a double-sized turn signal stalk, and you select the gear by twisting the switch at the end. So you pull it towards you for reverse, you pull it forward for drive, and park is a little button at the end of the stalk. Very unusual. Strangely, this stalk also incorporates the start-stop button to turn on the car. You press it here, and that starts things up, and then you can drive from there. Now, beyond that quirk, let's move on to the squares. Like you saw on the outside with the lighting up front and in back, there are more squares up here, starting on the steering wheel, where you have 4 squares. Instead of the brand's logo or the brand's name or Ioniq 9, just 4 squares. Now, 4 dots is Morse code for H, and of course Hyundai starts with H, so in addition to the sort of square theme, that also actually makes an H, sort of a clever little touch for this car. But you see these squares everywhere. Look in the center console, and you can see around the wireless charger, just little rubber squares all over to keep your phone in place. You look in the cup holder, same deal, circles for cups, but squares on the inside. Now, speaking of this center console, it's actually pretty clever because it moves. You can reach your hand under here, there's a little latch, and then you can move the center console forward or backward depending on who needs access. If rear passengers need access, you can slide it back there so they can get it. If you want it up front for easier access to your drink or your charging phone, you have it up here as well, which is a pretty nifty little trick. Also, a rather exciting trick in this vehicle is that the seats have power-operated leg rests. This little switch on the side of the seat will move forward a leg rest so that you can have your legs be comforted, and the seat can fully recline. So you can recline this like an airplane seat, like a first-class airplane seat, recline it back with the leg rest out, and you can just lie down here. Obviously not while you're driving, but if you want to stop and take a rest on a long road trip, or you're just waiting for your kids to finish with their sports practice, you can do that in the front seats, which is a pretty neat touch of this car. Adds to sort of the relaxing luxury atmosphere of this interior. Next up, we move on to some of the tech features, starting with the climate control, which is interesting. You operate it with a screen in the center, but it's not like a touch screen that's integrated into the overall screen system, so you go through menus. Instead, it's fixed in place. Just instead of buttons, you have this little screen. It works reasonably well, and it's kind of a cool operation. When you press something and tap it and select it, these little blue ripples kind of appear where you've pressed to sort of confirm your selection, which is kind of a neat little quirk of this vehicle. Now, moving on to the overall infotainment screen in the center, it's excellent. Its operation is very easy, very high quality, immediately responds to your touch. You have a big screen with great resolution. You can easily have whatever you want right at your fingertips. It's all a very good setup for the infotainment, and it has some interesting quirks. For one, there's a sports tab, I guess, within this infotainment screen. You can tap on it, and you can instantly select which league you want to see, basketball, baseball, whatever, and get scores. Or if that sport isn't playing, it actually tells you that it's in the off season currently. Just so you know, don't go looking for hockey scores in the summer. Another interesting quirk of this infotainment system is that the radio allows you to access your typical AM, FM, satellite radio, Bluetooth, etc. Or you can turn on the sounds of nature, which are preloaded nature sounds that come with the car, and you can select them and listen as you drive. Take a listen to Autumn Sentiments for a minute. All right, next up we move on to the gauge cluster, which is about the same size as the center infotainment screen, although obviously right in front of the steering wheel for the driver. Now, the gauge cluster I don't quite like as much as the infotainment system because it just doesn't provide enough information, at least in my view. You can't configure it like I wish you could to show like the map for the navigation system right in your line of sight like some cars offer. You also can't even have your music displayed here very easily, let alone both of those things like you can in some cars. I'm a little disappointed with the Hyundai and Kia gauge cluster screen setup. You just don't get that much stuff here. With that said, there are a couple of cool things integrated into the gauge cluster, even though you don't have everything. One, the driving range on electric. Now, all electric cars have this. It shows you how many miles till empty. But the cool thing here is it gives you a minimum and a maximum driving range. So a minimum, like if you drove it crazy and turned on all the air conditioning, how far would the least amount you could go be? And then maximum obviously is if you drove the most efficiently as possible, turned off everything, how far could you go? I actually like seeing this range. Of course, it gives you a specific overall number, but the range is kind of helpful to understand, hey, if I really wanted to run the climate controls and drive fast, even then I'll still go this far. It kind of helps with range anxiety. The other cool thing in the gauge cluster screen is that when you put on the turn signals, you get little cameras that pop on to show you what's in your blind spot. So if you're making a lane change, the blind spot camera comes on and shows you what vehicle is over there, and you can do that on both sides. It's actually very helpful and a pretty impressive safety feature you get in a lot of new Hyundai and Kia models, and I really wish that would spread to other cars throughout the industry because it really is impressively useful. And next we move on to the back seat, which is really impressively roomy. There is a lot of space for rear seat passengers back here, legroom, headroom, all of it. Despite that sort of teardrop shape of the vehicle, it really does seem very large, very roomy back here. A lot of space to kind of sit back, relax, chill, and the rear seats do the cool recline thing that the front seats did too, where you have that power-operated leg rest. It can swing forward, the seat can recline all the way back, and so even rear seat passengers can sit back here and recline to comfort, again, while the car is parked, but sit back here and really enjoy sort of a luxury nap in the back of the Ioniq 9. And there are other nice touches too. You can see the rear seat climate controls back here, pretty standard par for the course on vehicles like this at this price point, but one nice thing is heated rear seats and ventilated rear seats, which you don't always get. Plus, there are other cool touches, including a rear window sunshade. You have it on both sides. You can put the sunshade up to keep out the sun, obviously especially useful for infants or little children. And rear passengers can open up the front center console storage compartment. They press this little button and then this storage compartment opens from the rear, in addition to front seat passengers accessing it from the front. It is a cool magical compartment you can get at from both sides, which is neat. Also cool in this center console, and again remember it can slide backwards if you need it a little closer, but also cool back here is a storage compartment for rear seat passengers. It's built in. You have this little handle, you kind of pull it open, and then you have some extra rear seat storage back here, which is great. Now, not quite so great is the cup holder game in back. You do have cup holders, but they are only in the doors and they're a little small. You can see kind of two here on this side, and then you can maybe get another cup down in this bottom area. You don't have central cup holders like you do in so many cars with these captain's chairs. Instead, there's a little aisle for passing through to the rear seats, which is also useful, but so would more cup holders be. Anyway, speaking of the rear seats, the third row in this vehicle, access is quite easy, at least in this limited model with power seats. You just push this button and the seat automatically folds itself and slides forward. You don't have to do anything else. It's all done for you. Once that happens, of course, you just get into the third row and you can see they're pretty decent. They're not huge in back, legroom or headroom, but enough space for children, which is typically who rides back there, totally acceptable. And you have some decent amenities in back, like cup holders, individual to both rear seats, which is nice. You have a USB-C port on both sides for charging devices, which is cool. And you can, of course, push the button in the second row to power fold the seat in order to climb out from the third row, which makes life pretty easy to get out of that third row seat. Now, one drawback in this interior is that you don't have a household-style power port in the second or third row, like a typical plug-it-in power port. Should be pointed out in the second row, you do have USB-C ports as well on the backs of the front seats, which again is nice for charging devices, just like in the third row, but no typical household port like we're starting to see in more and more vehicles that would maximize convenience. And next up, we move on to the cargo area in the Ioniq 9, which I must say isn't exactly ideal. There is good space behind the third row, actually a surprising amount of space back here, but because of the teardrop shape, you are kind of closed in if you have larger items, taller stuff. You might not be able to fit it in or fit a lot of stuff on top of each other because of that shape kind of pinching the rear cargo area from above. It's a little bit of a drawback. Now, you do have extra cargo space below. You can see the floor lifts up, but when you lift it up, you find it's not particularly much more space. It's only a little bit of extra space. It doesn't really get you that much more cargo volume. Now, it's worth pointing out you can easily fold the second and third row seats from back here. So if you don't have passengers in all the seats, you can easily just press these buttons, the seats fold, and you instantly have access to a far larger cargo compartment, which is nice. Also worth pointing out back here, you do have a power port, just like I mentioned is missing from the second and third row seats. Well, here you have it in the back, a typical household style plug-it-in power port. It's great to have in the cargo area, but it would be a little bit nicer if you also had an additional one in the interior itself that would maximize convenience a little bit more. And finally, on the subject of cargo storage, let's talk about the front compartment. Obviously, an electric vehicle, no engine in here. Instead, you have a cargo compartment. You open it up and you can see, well, there's a little storage area under here, big enough to fit these bags which contain the charging cables, but not much bigger than that. It's not huge up front. It's still decent sized. It just isn't really massive. Still nice to have extra storage up front. Also up front, you can see this vented area in front of the cargo compartment. Again, tiny squares everywhere, because that is a theme of the car carried into every part, including the front trunk. Now, since I'm up here, usually I talk about engines. This car doesn't have one, but let's talk performance nonetheless. There are 3 different levels of Ioniq 9 performance. The base model has about 215 horsepower and front-wheel drive. That's the one that starts around $58,000. Now, from there, you can step up to a mid-level version that has about 300 horsepower, which strikes me as about all you need in a vehicle like this. That's sort of where all the mid-trim models are. This particular version is the top trim performance model, has about 420 horsepower, which is nice and muscular, but maybe not really essential for a 3-row family SUV. This one does 0 to 60 in about 4.4 seconds, which is pretty quick for a vehicle like this. Again, maybe not entirely necessary, but neat to have. On the subject of performance, well, let's see how it performs. I'm eager to check it out, get it out on the road, get behind the wheel, and see how it drives. So let's do it. All right, driving the Ioniq 9. This is, if you're in the market for a family electric SUV, this is probably one of your most desired, kind of most long-awaited vehicles, because it's sort of like a nice luxury 3-row, not that crazy expensive like some of the other ones. Like, this kind of checks all the boxes for a decent amount of people. I know there's not a lot of people looking for electric 3-row, but there's a decent amount, and there's basically nothing out there unless you want to spend really crazy money or compromise on the electric thing and like get a plug-in hybrid like a Pacifica or something like that, or a Lexus TX. This really does it all. And I gotta say, it does it well. There's a lot of stuff that I like about this vehicle. I love the ride. I love the driving experience. It is very comfortable, very smooth in here. The Kia EV9, like I mentioned, is sort of shares its platform and its mechanicals with this car, but the EV9 has sort of a more funky design, a more funky interior. It's pitched, I think, for more of like a, ooh, this is cool and quirky kind of crowd, and this is more of like a serious sort of luxury kind of crowd. And that's exactly what they respectively deliver. This car has a pretty like luxurious, smooth, quiet, kind of nice feel to it. And the EV9 does as well, but this one definitely is more in that direction. And it really is quiet. It's a nice, quiet ride. I will say the ride quality isn't like an ultra luxury car. I think that the Lexus TX rides better. I think that Mercedes-Benz GLE, for example, and GLS, which are not electric, they ride better. This isn't quite on the level of like those true luxury cars from luxury brands, but you're also not paying that kind of money. I mean, this one at $70-some thousand is very expensive, but when you look at where those vehicles are priced, that the Volvo EX90 starts above $81,000, and then, you know, you get it well equipped, you're into the 90s. Like, this actually has a pretty good price and price point, considering all the equipment you get and considering how it drives and feels. Now, I will say earlier, I floored the accelerator, really punched it, and it is quick. But I have a suspicion that virtually nobody who has one of these vehicles will ever experience that. It's just not really worth even getting into the whole acceleration thing. It's fast, 0 to 60 in the low 4s, I think, low to mid 4s, which is great. But ultimately, you know, this is a mid-size family kind of vehicle. And I will say, to that end, there's no real need to buy the performance model as a result. This one with its $70-some thousand price tag is expensive, but you really don't have to go this high. I think you could get one of these pretty nice in the 60s, compromise on power and performance, which is obviously totally fine in a family vehicle like this. There's just so much to love about this car. You have a great interior, you have great technology, nice roomy space in here, drives well, good performance, relatively good price tag, and obviously full electric. I mean, this car, not only is it sort of the only game in town when it comes to a relatively affordable 3-row family EV SUV, but it's also good. Like, it doesn't have to be good. I think people would buy it just because it's sort of the default, like the only choice. But it's also like quite a good vehicle, quite a desirable, good, legitimately nice vehicle. And although these top trim levels, the Limited, this one, the Calligraphy, are really nice, they do start to get spendy, especially for a Hyundai. And some of the stuff that it adds, especially the performance, I'm not sure is necessary for most people. I think a lot of people could be totally happy in this vehicle, grabbing you know, kind of a low mid-trim model, getting a little less power, a little less stuff, and just cruising around with their kids. I think this car checks a lot of boxes for a lot of families, and it's great to see a 3-row entrant in this segment, and it's especially one that's this high quality and this good. I did the preview video of this right when it was announced a few months ago, back in November, I guess, actually, so almost a year getting up, and it was great, and it seemed like it was going to be great, and indeed, getting in this car and using it and experiencing it, it is even better than I was thinking it would be then. Just because it drives so well, it just feels like such a competent vehicle, so smooth, so quiet, so relatively, you know, decent seating position as an SUV. I just think it checks so many of the great right boxes that people are exactly looking for if they're interested in buying a car like this. And so that's the new 2026 Hyundai Ioniq 9. There's a lot to like here, as this combines a roomy interior with relatively affordable pricing, good tech, luxury, and a full electric driving experience with good performance and range. This will surely be a hit, especially because it's basically the only vehicle that does it all right now. Anyway, now it's time to give the Ioniq 9 a DougScore. And the DougScore is here, 54 out of 100, which puts the Ioniq 9 here against rivals. Yes, the Rivian R1S and Volvo EX90 are ranked higher, but they're also way more expensive. If you can afford them, buy them. Otherwise, the Ioniq 9 provides an excellent compromise for people interested in a full electric SUV and a practical 3-row model, offering reasonable pricing, a luxury feel, good tech, and a big interior.